Welcome to the Smarter Spaces podcast. It's episode 1 of a new podcast series, and we're starting off with an amazing topic, an amazing guest, an amazing solution that we're talking about in this episode. And it's all around updating the New York Giants draft room. Now, to unpick that for me, I know nothing about American football. I know nothing about draft rooms. So I, as many of you, will be learning as we go here on this podcast. So our guests this afternoon or this morning, depending on when you're watching this, is it Siam? Is that how you pronounce that, Ty?
Siam.
Siam, apologies. And you are Director of Football Data and Innovation. And that's football as in American, not soccer for me and everybody else over here, right? Just clear that and get that out of the gate.
That's right. Yeah. It's my 9th season with the Giants. I started here as an intern and kind of grew up growing out our data department. And now as a Director of Football Data and Innovation, I oversee all of the technology and data integration efforts for the entire football operation for the New York Giants.
Very cool. And then also joining me from Crestron, we have Mr. Brad Hintze, who is EVP of Marketing. Brad, you're going to help me on the podcast and help me out with this American football malarkey.
I will do my best to help you out there, Neil. And Ty, it's so great to see you again. I've loved working together on this project just because of your vision and the way that you're using technology to solve some of these very complex problems for the team. I think it's so fascinating and it's super exciting.
Yeah, very, very cool. So I think the first question, again, this is a global podcast. We could have people all around the world watching. So those who aren't an NFL fan, what is a draft room? Because when I first heard of it, I was like, draft room? This is like, because in the UK, drafting is, what you do with like CAD and drawing and, in the old days. So talk us through this whole draft room and draft process and what goes on with that.
Maybe a better term for draft room would be like decision center. But for us, the NFL draft is a 3-day period in the NFL calendar that happens at the end of April. That's really a consolidation of a year-long effort of acquiring information and making player evaluations for all of the college prospects that are NFL eligible. And then it's an organization of picks that teams are going to make to select players to start their career in the NFL. So the NFL draft is a very involved process. And, some people think that maybe all 32 teams in the NFL are doing that draft day process wherever the NFL league office chooses to hold the draft. But really, as great as that is for the fans and the players who are about to have these big decisions made for their families, on the team side, we all kind of hunker down into our facility and do that, spend those 3 days in a room. And then we call that the draft room.
Wow.
And that's a room that's equipped with all the technology and data feeds necessary to make the decisions for their team while they're on the clock. And being on the clock is some of maybe the most stressful seconds and minutes that exist for a general manager's tenure in the NFL, but we really lean into it and have a lot of fun with that. And this room that we're going to talk about today has really changed the way we think about NFL draft night, as well as many other decision-making periods around the football calendar.
It is, to me, getting involved with you and what you're doing there. It's such these are really the team defining moments, right? Those 3 days, right? I mean, is it that fair? Is that over dramatic to put it that way?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge opportunity for teams to fill in the gaps for what they need. And, it's a great perspective on not only where a team's roster can go, but it follows free agency. So there's a little bit of glue that's already occurred in the offseason plan from a roster construction standpoint. And this is really the last opportunity for player personnel offices in the NFL to make decisions around what players are going to impact their roster and help us on week 1 through 18 in the NFL season a couple months later.
Yeah,
very cool. And for those watching, Brad, this is something that Crestron have worked with the New York Giants on specking out the equipment. We've been talking about high impact spaces on webinars and at trade shows, but this is probably the pinnacle of a high impact space, as we would call it at Crestron, and fitted out with all of our equipment in this space. So content sharing, control, communications, Teams rooms, Zoom rooms. And I think you even mentioned, Brad, that they were doing like Facebook video and things like that in this room.
FaceTime video.
FaceTime
Yeah.
video. Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Wow. So the complete portfolio
Yep.
from Crestron. So I guess, Ty, we kind of I've teased there about the fact of what's now in there, but what happened in the old days? Steam powered. Everything was written down, and then obviously we came along at Crestron and revolutionized it. Talk us through the process, pre Crestron and pre the update of this latest incarnation of the technology in there. How did it work, and what were the challenges you found?
It's a great question, and there's probably a pretty broad continuum of spaces that exist in the NFL. And the way I say it is like, there's probably no wrong way, right? There's no wrong way so long as the decision makers have the ability to make primary decisions on draft night and other periods of the year, so long as they have the information and the timeliness about what the league is interpreting on their end of things in real time. But before we installed this room, it was a very sterile looking room that had light colored walls. 3 of the walls had magnetic wallpaper on them. We had maybe 3 40-inch TVs peppered around the room that we had some digital feeds going into, and we had one primary board that was about an 85-inch TV screen that we had some information kind of funneling into. But outside of that and some of the technical capabilities that we added with those few screens, it was a very manual process. We had a feed into what the league was interpreting from which players were selected, how much time was remaining, which teams are upcoming on the clock. But we had a magnet to represent every player in the draft. And so as a player would get picked, you can imagine somebody would be responsible for going up to grab that player off of our board and moving him under the assigned team that just selected that player. But on top of that, we had a number of other manual processes that were necessary. This year there was 257 picks. At any given point, trades could occur to change those picks and swap them around. So we had people responsible for moving, team logos from spot, number 27 down to 31 and so on and so forth. So it was a very kind of manual process. And on draft night, you felt that, but you also felt that from our draft meetings where, questions would be asked about players, and it would take, not the order of 10 minutes, but it would take a minute to get to the bottom of, how much play time did that guy have? How much special times production did this guy have? What was the character, the makeup, the background, the grades that we have on this player? And by transforming that room, we moved away from this magnetic landscape to this digital landscape that allowed us to put all that information up on a player, a process, a team, you name it. And that's really helped us kind of modernize our process, not only on draft night, trade period, cut down period, but all the meetings that lead up to those periods.
So it sounds like a really manual process. I mean, was the impetus of doing the upgrade around trying to streamline and replace those manual processes and make it more automated, or was it to actually capture more features and more capabilities in the space?
Yeah, I think it was both. I think the modernization of our process was both viewed from an efficiency standpoint, because you can imagine not only do those magnets cost us time and moving them around, but it costs a lot of time to make sure, hey, did they get printed right? Did the right information get put onto those magnets? Then we had to peel labels and put them onto those cards. And then we had to make sure that all those cards were inventoried and cataloged in the appropriate spaces on those walls. So all in the while that was occurring, we were building digital solutions in the background that could help kind of inform decision makers in a better way. But the efficiency was certainly a big part of it, but also the streamlining of information to help empower our decision makers so that they had the best info at their fingertips at any given point on a player, process, or team, so that we could kind of kick things off and have really meaningful conversations. And all that time saved from an efficiency standpoint could then be spent on which player are we going to sign? what are the limiting factors of that plan? What's the fail factor? What's the upside? What's the conviction? We could spend time on these conversations that we frankly didn't have we didn't always have prior to that.
So the efficiencies are really trying to allow you to concentrate on the actual task in hand rather than the process and the technology and everything behind it, and trying to allow you to make that decision based around the facts rather than, analog technology or physical devices and moving those around.
And I think for me, when I visited the space, I mean, it's super stunning when you walk in there, right? It's impressive itself. But the first time you started up the software and you showed me the player cards and all the data that was associated with it, it really clicked for me how transformative I think this room has become. And it's not just because, oh, great, we can show data up on a screen. It was really the way that you so expertly designed the software to present the data in a way that's unique to your organization, to the decisions that you are trying to make. And I think that it's, what happens in there is such a really interesting view of, the power that you have within software development and data, but also more importantly, a clear vision of what you want. Right? What do you want to see? Right? Because you in this, you're a software engineer, right? You're a UX designer creating software that's showing exactly how you want that information presented. And I think that was a really great example of how you can create this customized workflow just for you, and the impact that it had on that efficiency and making those decisions and focusing the debate on the right elements and not just on the data gathering itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a testament to kind of where we're at in the NFL, and our player personnel leadership is super process oriented, and we say that humbly. Like, these guys have a clear vision of how they want things to operate, and they have processes in place and assignments in place for everybody in our front office to be doing work of some variety. So then we couple that with a software development team who did a tremendous job envisioning how can we actionize those processes from in a digital way. And then we have a data team that has really thought intelligently about what kinds of things that we can put in front of those decision makers to help aid those processes and support those decisions, or refute them in some cases. It's become a really nice cohesion of software and data and player personnel process. And we've all been on the same page, kind of in lockstep throughout this process. We've had really open dialogues about what would this be in your ideal state? What would be a minimally viable way to get there? What would be a cool idea to introduce into the process and things like that? So it was a great learning experience for me, and really made me appreciate the collection of people that we have in our front office, because our software group and our data group and our player personnel staff on the pro and college side have done just such a great job being open-minded to changing from the physical world into this digital world and taking that leap of faith that's helped us get there.
Yeah.
Very cool. Now, obviously the draft is a 3-day process, I believe, from what you just said, but what about the rest of the time? One of the things I saw in the space was there's a raised floor. Can you talk us through again what happens outside of the draft process, and again some of the other use cases for this impactful space that you have there?
Yeah, the raised floor was one that I was like, I scratched my head about it at first, but it was a really interesting idea. And we used an AV integrator called Image Engineering, and they thought of things that I would have never thought of. And they basically said, hey, this room is going to be a flexible workspace, and who knows over the years how you're going to want it to transform. And so they really thought about the flexibility of the space and making sure that we wouldn't have to undermine any physical infrastructure around it. So instead of putting plugs into a hard floor and things like that, they said, let's raise the floor up a couple inches. Let's build kind of a modular panel on top of it that we can just run cable underneath. So at this point, we're not tied to the furniture configuration that we have in the room. So on draft night, we're trying to maximize volume. We have a big conference, a big executive conference table. We have a number of peripheral tables around the side. But as we move into training camp and we need seating for, our 10 to 12 college scouts that are visiting, we can flip those tables, turn them towards a screen, and turn them into a secondary monitor as a local workstation. But the primary configuration we found as we've used that room for a couple of years now is the executive conference table facing the main board and having some satellite tables around so that we have overflow seating necessary. So there's basically a spot at the table for everybody that needs to be in the room at any given time. But, we use that room certainly in the draft. We use it throughout training camp as we're evaluating all the other 31 rosters and what might happen at the roster cut down time period. We use that room throughout the fall as our pro scouting department's working on their scouting advance as we prepare for opponents. We use it as we prepare for free agency and the UFA process that begins really, January, February, March. And we use it at the trade deadline, which happens at the end of October. So it's really become, like that term I used at the beginning, decision center oriented, where there's no bounds in how we can use that room. Anytime we need a solution, the technology within the room can push information anywhere we want it. And whether that be somebody plugging in at the table or us having a custom software solution built in to integrate all of those kind of data feeds necessary for those kind of points in the calendar, we've used it for all those array of things.
Very cool. Now, we talked about FaceTime earlier. Can you describe the kind of different tech in the room? So you've kind of alluded to some of this, but talk us through the kind of start to finish draft process from a tech point of view and how it's used on draft day. What about the solutions and the configurations in the room with regards to things like, again, bringing in people on FaceTime or Teams or Zoom or these other platforms, and then again how you've then changed from that magnet form into this new tech and digital space.
Yeah, that was another idea by the image engineering guys when they thought about, like, hey, this whole system. They heard kind of how we wanted to use it. They sat with a number of different stakeholders in our front office, and the couple ideas that they threw at us was one being the raised floor among a number of other things. But FaceTime was the other. I was like, hey, why are we throwing a Mac Mini into the rack? And it's like, oh, well, you're probably going to want to FaceTime somebody at some point, and that's how you're going to be able to do it. And again, didn't even know how big a thing that was going to be. But our head coach, Brian Dable, he loves FaceTime. And so we'll be in the middle of the meetings and say, hey, get Dabes on FaceTime. And so we can pull him up on that side of things. But on draft night, let's think about how special that experience is from the player standpoint. They just got selected by the New York Football Giants. We're in the middle of our 100th season right now. Like, it's pretty cool to be drafted by an iconic franchise such as the Giants. So they're there celebrating with their family, and we're able to FaceTime them in the room. So certainly Joe and the head coach, everyone's already talked to that guy on the telephone, but now everybody in the room gets to be placed where that player is and see visually who are the people around them, how are they celebrating, all that stuff. And then conversely, on the player side, they feel the love of the 30 plus people that are in that room, giving them a round of applause, saying, hey, let's go, let's be a Giant, let's go do great things together. And that was a pretty cool experience to be able to have that technology equipped within the rack and to see what it kind of grew into, not only on draft night, but just the flexibility to FaceTime interview candidates or prospective players or Dave's in the middle of meetings or on his birthday. It's a lot of fun.
Now you kind of answered the question. I was going to say, what made you and why did you choose Crestron? But I mean, you kind of answered it through all the different things that you've talked about, and it's easy for me to see why. But again, what was your decision process? And again, what made you swing your process towards Crestron and our solutions?
Yeah, so image engineering was the integrator that we ended up choosing after kind of vetting a number of other integrators. And not only were they recommended by another team that had done this, but just looking at and hearing the way that they kind of responded to our RFP, essentially, we could just tell that they were going to be the right partner for us to share the vision and work alongside of us. And in working with them, they said, hey, we could do this, at the base level, we could do it at the mid level, or we could do it at the high level. And fortunately, we had buy-in from our football leadership, and then certainly from ownership, who was so generous to say, we can buy into that. We subscribe to that vision. We see the value that could produce, and we don't want to cut any corners. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. And so we went to that high-end level, and everything about the high-end level was supported through Crestron Technologies. So they said, you're going to want to use their interface. You're going to want to use their racks. You're going to want to use all of the technology that they support because it's best in class. It's going to be the most efficient thing to support the ideas you have about content distribution. And it's going to enable that room physically to support all of the different meeting mechanics that you're going to want to have. So there was no ambiguity from it. That when we got the buy-in to kind of go on the high end of things, that's the way we were going, and there was really no other option at that point besides Crestron, because of the experiences we heard, because of the experiences they've had in their installations through other technologies, and kind of trying to put square pegs into round holes and things like that. So fortunately, again, we had a good integrator that made that suggestion to us to kind of insulate us from an unknown. And we already knew that Crestron was a leading vendor because of how embedded they were in our meeting rooms downstairs and how our coaches use those technology solutions to run their meetings on a day-to-day basis.
Very cool. And Brad, what does it mean for us at Crestron to obviously be partnering with the New York Giants? This amazing, high level football team in America, and also from what Ty's been saying, around the world, Munich, London, as a global partner.
Yeah, it's obviously always a great thing to be able to be associated with such an iconic team. Especially one too that's just down the street. The team plays not too far from our headquarters here in New Jersey. And so, it's always a great thing to be able to talk about our association. More importantly, though, the one thing I love, and I've seen it as I've been talking about this room and what happens in the room, is that the team here and what Ty's talked us through is a very real example of how technology can assist an organization in making their own decisions. And so I love having the ability to point to that and to talk about that. And so I think there's so much value in terms of inspiring other organizations, whether you're part of the government, whether you're in education, whether you're in enterprise, right? Being able to see what other people have done and gain inspiration from that, I think is a really great thing about telling the story and the transformation that Ty and team have made here. It's pretty cool too, how prominently you guys are such a part of the Hard Knocks season. I've had so many people reach out and say, "Oh, I've been watching Hard Knocks. It's pretty awesome," and to hear that angle of the story as well. So it's very cool to be associated with such a spectacular team and group of people as well.
And Ty, have we got good plans for the rest of the season? Are we going to be successful? Are the Giants going to finish up on top, do you think? You hope? Of course they are.
Hey, the best thing about the NFL is every season you start new. So we're really at the beginning of it. So training camp, we only just now put pads on. So it's still a lot to kind of form in the identity of the Giants this season. But we're hoping for a great season.
Very cool. And with this new Sparta space, there's nothing to stop you, and a great partnership with Crestron, and we thank you for your support and partnership, and obviously wish you a great season, and hope that you're going to have every success in that. And thank you for joining us on this podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Brad, for joining us on this first episode. I feel I've learned a lot about draft rooms and NFL. I need to go and sign up and watch it, and give up this soccer lark and get into this American version of football. Clearly, it's much better.
It is definitely much better.
Very cool. Thank you for tuning in. If it's your first time here, then make sure you subscribe, follow us on all the good socials. This is the Smarter Spaces podcast. We're on all good places, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and all good social media platforms. Subscribe, follow, share it with your friends. We're going to be back on a regular cadence, sharing some of those great Smarter Spaces that Crestron develop with our partners for you, our customers, to make your spaces smarter and give you the opportunity to make work easier, simpler, and more efficient. I will catch you on the next one.